Okay, that's everyone.
All right, wonderful. All right, good. I'm going to say afternoon, everybody. Happy New Year and welcome. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And Brenda, if you wouldn't mind taking roll, that would be helpful.
Okay, I will start with Chair Moore,
Present.
Vice Chair Habenik,
Present.
Board Member Sierra, Mayor Sierra,
Present.
Board Member Ridley,
Present.
Board Member Anderson,
Present.
Board Member Boriski. Sorry, am I saying your last name correctly?
Yeah, Boreski.
Okay, Boriski. Board Member Woodward,
Present.
Board Member Roth, if you're saying something, we can't hear you. Okay, well, he's present on the meeting, but we can't hear him. And then Board Member Mercier. And she's not present.
Wonderful. All right, thank you. We do have a quorum. Appreciate everyone adjusting to the different time for this week. First order of business is the Water and Sewer Board agenda or minutes from the last meeting of December 14th. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
I will move the minutes from our
Thanks, Jim. In
December.
a second. Sorry.
Yep.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Next is public forum. Brenda, do we have anyone from the public to address us tonight?
No, we do not have any public comment tonight.
Very good. Then our one new order of business is the city ditch relocation agreement. And Steve, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, is it in presentation mode?
No, it's not.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
There we go. That's better. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chair. This item before the board is a consideration to recommend that council approve an ordinance that comprises two agreements, one easement agreement with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and an intergovernmental agency agreement with Douglas County. Both of these are required as part of a relocation effort of City Ditch that's a result of the work that's being done on Santa Fe to improve that roadway. This particular area is near the I-470 and Santa Fe interchange. The project's being led by Douglas County. We have Art Griffith and Neil Sarno joining us. So during the Q&A, if there's any technical or project specific questions, they are available. Thank you, Art and Neil, for taking the time to join us.
Sure, glad to be here.
Okay, so as I mentioned, this is actually a larger project, I believe, on the order of $100 million and about 2.5 miles. The area that we are looking at, there's actually two areas that require either easement or relocation of a portion of that work. The one we're going to focus on today is near that southwest corner of the Santa Fe and 470 interchange. The work in this area is going to result in widening the Santa Fe to the west, which then would put the existing alignment of City Ditch underneath that roadway. So early on in this planning and design effort, Douglas County had provided a design that kept the pipeline underneath the roadway. City staff returned with a request to realign that outside of the roadway and through collaboration with our agencies, we were able to, or Douglas County was able to work with their engineers and accommodate that request. The reason we didn't want it underneath the roadway, that's going to be a high volume and a higher speed area. There would have been manholes that were either in the roadway or in islands to access that. And we didn't want city staff out there in that type of environment whenever maintenance would have to be accomplished. So it's a much safer approach to have the ditch outside of the alignment. On top of that, if there were any failure that would occur on the ditch, then there's a much lower consequence if that happens in its proposed alignment versus underneath a major roadway. So again, there's two agreements that are associated with this. One is the Army Corps agreement. That's going to be so that the realigned city ditch will be on Army Corps property. So that then triggered the requirement for an easement. That'll be a 25-year easement with the Corps. The cost of that easement was $2,000. Douglas County has provided reimbursement for that. So as soon as we're able to execute into this agreement, the city will be reimbursed for that portion. On the intergovernmental agency agreement side, that basically established the roles and duties of our respective agencies in the continued project development of this. So from the Douglas County side, it establishes Douglas County's role to manage and fund the work. On the city side, it establishes our role to enter into the easement agreement with the Army Corps, and then for the city to be a participant in project development. So that's design reviews, submittal reviews, it's participation in stakeholder meetings. Once this project gets into construction, it'll also include on-site inspection work for all the work that's related to city ditch. So taking a closer look at the project area again, this is the interchange of Santa Fe and 470. Just to the southwest is the Army Corps property that we are that is subject to this easement. The red line is the existing alignment of city ditch. That yellow shaded area is the proximate extent of the construction and the road widening. So as you can see, as part of the process, it would have put that red portion under the roadway. So the blue line is the approximate location of the realigned ditch. We'll be acquiring at a minimum a 30-foot wide easement in this area, which gives us rights to do not only the construction, but also the long-term, or access it for the long-term operations and maintenance. As far as schedule goes, Douglas County is anticipating releasing the construction invitation to bid for the work later this month, and construction is expected to begin later in the spring. Within the agreements is the acknowledgement that during the irrigation season, the city has contractual obligations to provide water to its contract users. So any work that would require disruption of that service would have to be, if it's a very short term, can be coordinated with the city, or for longer term would need to be done outside of that irrigation season. So that concludes my presentation, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions from yourself or the board. Again, we have Art and Neil joining us from Douglas County that are leading the project on the Douglas County side.
Right. Anyone want to raise their hand, or feel free to just jump in as well. This, Steve, I'll kick it off with a couple questions. Art, I had one. I think you mentioned a 25-year easement. Did I hear that correctly? And if so, what happens after 25 years?
It would be renewed after 25 years.
Okay.
So we would have to go back, a reasonable amount of time before that expiration, which would be in 2046 after the execution of this. We would go back and renew an easement with the Corps.
And we're not. That's not. I'm just confirming. There's no risk of someone having the choice not to renew that easement when the time comes, and that we find ourselves disconnected.
So I'll jump in on this. So this is actually something that we did talk about. There's not a no risk.
Okay.
because someone 25 years from now from the Corps could say, we don't want to renew the easement. And this is something that we went back and forth on, and it is a low risk. However, if the board would like to, for us to go back and include language that ensures that if there is an issue with securing an easement 25 years from now, that is a responsibility of Douglas County to ensure that basically our ditch is maintained if the Corps comes back and says. I think that's something that could be added if we need to. I would have to defer to the county on this. It goes, essentially what happens is we go from a situation where I have a ditch with no risk to we're incorporating some amount of risk as a result of this project. And so I think there are ways to mitigate that risk in the language. That again, it comes down to, is it, we're also governmental partners, and how do we, we want to support this project. But your question is a important question that we did talk about, but internally. But if it is something that we need to go back and look at, we can talk to Douglas County about.
Yeah, certainly I'll be interested in other reactions, but I would think I would assume our rights are, I'll say, absolute currently. So we are, yeah, as you said, we're trading from a no risk situation to an at risk. It seems like we should have some kind of contractual assurance. 25 years both passes quickly, and also things can change abruptly in that period of time. A quick other follow-up question before I hit some of the other hands. What's the piping situation through there? If you could remind me, is this area already?
It's already piped
through that. So we're just moving the pipe over.
That's right.
Okay. Jim and then Joe.
I have two things. One is with regard to the 25, is that the maximum that we can get currently? Is 25 years?
I believe that's a standard practice for the Army Corps of Engineers. And so there are other water agencies around the Front Range that have easements across the Corps of Engineer property, and it's a 25-year easement period. Again, if this becomes an issue, this can be mitigated with language in the agreement. And so it's something that if we need to go back and work with, at the direction of the board, work with the county to ensure that essentially we go from a no risk situation to another no risk situation as a result of this. That's something that, if that's the board's choice, we can go back and do that.
Well, I would be in favor of going back and approaching Douglas County, and is there, in the agreement with the Corps, is there a possibility of doing an actual another 25-year option or something like that to at least see what we can get there? Or are they going to say, yeah, it's our agreement, this is standard, don't complicate it?
It's hard to say what the Corps is going to do. I think that, again, we're heading down the path of what is standard practice for the Corps. I think that again, it's a low possibility of risk, but again, it's if we want to eliminate risk, that might be that. I think the way to do that is to ensure that there's a provision in the agreement that ties back to the original movement of the ditch from its original alignment and the responsibility associated with that.
Okay.
I'm sorry to interject, Peter, a quick background question. Does the city own the property that the ditch currently is on, or does the city just have a permanent easement for all the property that the ditch sits on?
Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is it's permanent easement associated with the ditch.
So a question might be that even if we agree, I'm sorry, Steve, confirm.
Yeah, in areas where there's not a defined easement, because it's such an old piece of infrastructure that there's prescriptive easements. So we wouldn't go find an actual the legal description of it, but yeah, we would possess what's a prescriptive easement with it.
If we agree to allow the ditch to be moved, does it take away? Do we then forfeit the existing easement? I mean, maybe that's part of it, that if we're still not giving up that right, then, theoretically, if something went wrong down the road, we still have the right to reclaim the old spot or something. As impractical as that is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how a prescriptive easement works across federal property. So, or if you're moving a prescriptive easement, if that triggers the need to formalize the easement, I mean, in my experience, that's typically, if you're taking something like that and you're moving it and you're triggering a change, that's when you formalize everything. And so that's what I think we're doing here. Again, I think this is easily overcomable, as long as the county is understanding, from this discussion, understands the concerns of the board. And then we can potentially just amend the language and ensure that risk is mitigated.
Jim, did you finish your questions?
Well, yeah, no, I would be in favor of that, Peter, in board. My second question was somewhat simpler, I hope. Can we go back to the slide that had, the first one that had location? I had some questions on, just a question on that. Well, I guess it was discussion. It was the one before this, that one. What I'm seeing, what appears to me to be a long US 285 between the two projects is a thin blue line. Is that currently the pipe going down the highway, or is that outside of the highway?
This line here is the highway, and the city ditch alignment is here.
Okay, so that blue line that on the highway isn't currently the ditch or anything.
That's correct. Can you confirm that, Art? I believe that to be true.
Again,
The alignment, the question is the blue line here, that's the existing Santa Fe, and then the meandering line over here is the city ditch alignment.
yeah, I'm not sure at that scale if you zoomed in a little bit, but I would say that up there on the north of C470 on the north, where the city ditch, it's actually outside of your existing easement that got resolved years back with CDOT when they acquired. So we're actually in the northern project, which is the Schedule B. We're actually moving you into your easement, and it was some conflict with our project. So as part of this dual project that we're doing that. Now, concerning the agreement down here on the core property where it talks about Schedule A in the lower right corner of the drawing, in there, I think, Steve, you properly stated that you've been there before the Corps came, and you have a prescriptive easement. I don't think we ever found a document for that. And in fact, one of the things I think when we first met was beyond this segment that we're trying to kind of record in a more formal way, that you expressed interest with the Corps to continue that further south. And so in that section where it says Schedule A, that's just a prescriptive easement, and now we'd have a formal easement. But as part of the conversations that's been discussed, nowhere did it say you were vacating, that I recall, Peter, that you're vacating what you currently have. And we surely could memorialize that to help mitigate any concerns. Matter of fact, that existing pipe could be plugged and left in the ground as well. But it would be, I think, Neil maybe can correct me, but I think we have about 12 to 15 foot of fill coming as the project widens.
That's correct.
West.
You've got it, Art. One thing I can do right now is just bring up kind of a plan view of the project, and that might help. I'm trying to share the screen here, but it won't allow me. So there's a way that we can do that. That would be great.
It's under options, Neil, if it's a Zoom meeting, I think. I'm not 100%.
I'm just going,
Options at the top.
got it right now.
The drag
Neil,
down.
Yes.
actually, Neil, let me hold on just a second. Let
Go ahead.
me give Joe the opportunity to get his question on the table in case it
Okay.
affects further discussion or to defer. Joe, would you like to jump in now or after Neil speaks?
Well, you were actually, John, you were after my line of questioning. I have a little bit more to add to that, but I can wait for Neil to finish. That's fine. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, Neil, go ahead.
Very good. I think the initial question was regarding the existing city ditch and then also the proposed. And I think this is a very good illustration of that right here. So, and whether it's under the existing roadway, if I recall, that's what I think one of the questions was there. So in this lighter blue, and let me know if you can all see the screen there and that plan view. So this
Yes.
lighter blue, and if you
Yes.
follow my hand there, this is the existing city ditch. You can see it's called out here. What you're going to see on top of this, of course, is our proposed US 85 widening. And this is where, again, where Steve was mentioning that with our proposed widening, a good majority of the existing city ditch would be covered by our proposed widening there. This right here would be the new city ditch tying into the existing right here and continuing from the south to the north. And again, you can see right here where city ditch is really kind of just arcs right outside into 85 there, right? And then just peels right back in. This right here, if you're familiar with Chatfield and the parking lot area there, this is kind of right at the bottom of that embankment. That's right there. And it would continue.
Right at the edge of the fence, Neil, of the
Right.
existing fence. Yeah.
Exactly. And so this continues here, goes across, or should I say under 470, of course. Ties in here, what would be on the north side of I'm sorry, this is still the south side of 470 there. And ties into the old city ditch. You can see right here too, this is very good to demonstrate or illustrate how we're coming in pretty much from the angle from CPW, whereas the existing you could see here was kind of that arc that came out through 85 and comes right back in. So this is right here where this would be, we would be picking up or tying in, if you will, from the existing.
And Neil, I might add that tie-in point is located between eastbound C470 and the eastbound off-ramp.
That's
So
right.
that's where the tie-in, and then we don't touch anything underneath C470.
That's correct.
So-
This is all existing here. We don't touch that. Then we pick it up what would be on the north of 470 here. And I think this is the area, Art, you were describing that the existing city ditch is outside of the existing easement. And so we're putting it back in the easement right here, continuing. And then tying into the existing again here on the north end. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. I know there's several pages here if there's anything that you have any questions on through that, but just wanted to bring kind of the plans to light and what we're trying to achieve here.
And I do want to echo everyone's sentiment about that 25-year, the core number that was put in. And that was the first thing when I read the core easement. It's like, what's 25 years mean? But I'd heard that that's all the federal government does, you know, on these types of things. And so that's kind of out of our control. I'm not sure how we would reduce that risk, you know, as far as, although I don't think it's real, I just don't think they have any in perpetuity anymore. And I think if you had more than a prescriptive easement through here, that might be a different thing, but I'm not sure, Steve or Peter, what we can do about that 25-year time clock that the Corps gave us.
Well, so I'm not suggesting that we can do anything about the time clock. What I'm suggesting is that the county can provide an assurance in the agreement that says if for some reason 25 years from now the easement goes away and we have an issue with this pipe, which keep in mind, this is our most critical water supply for the entire city, is this pipeline. So it's not like it's just a water line sitting in a roadway. This is the raw water system, the pipe to get water from Chatfield to the plant. So this isn't some small piece of infrastructure. So I guess what I would say is that somewhere in the agreement is a statement that says, if for some reason the Corps at a future date does not renew the agreement, the county will take necessary steps to ensure mitigation of that issue. And it's like two sentences like that. It gets memorialized in an agreement, and then the trigger of the road which causes this move then retains the long-term responsibility of the risk that's associated with the project, if that makes sense. That's where I think the county can come and in just a couple statements provide assurance that if something goes wrong in 25 years, we'll be back to make sure that you guys aren't without your most critical water supply for the city.
Yeah, and I'm not in the attorney, so I'll definitely check in, but you know, there's two things about putting a statement like that which can easily be done, because any agreement subject to annual appropriations, you know, 29 CRS 29-1-110, you can't bind future boards. You can't even bind your own board. You know, Inglewood couldn't bind a future board, and we can't bind a future board. So whatever we put in there would be subject to annual appropriations. I just it gets complicated.
It just becomes a part of the IGA, or I don't think it becomes an appropriation thing. We do IGAs that last, you know, decades, or we do agreements that last decades. So I think it just becomes a provision within the agreement.
It's a cost of the current transaction. We're trading one thing for another, and that permanent protection is being transacted now. So it has to be able to be built into this as opposed to being subject to the whim of future boards. In that respect, we can't give up an asset without proper consideration here, which is the protection of our lifeline. Joe, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you. I think most of my questions have been answered by this point, but and maybe this is for Steve, we talked about the easements along the city ditch. There are a number of places where the city actually owns right of way, right? It's not all within easements, just maybe along Santa Fe here, or do you know that? How much of the city ditch is owned and how much of it is within easement?
I have to look into that. My understanding was that I'm not sure if any right-of-way was actually transacted. My understanding was that all of the prescriptive easement that Denver held when they owned the ditch was basically transferred to us. But I can look into that for you, member.
Well, and it also comes down to the ditch predates everything.
Right.
So everything in the area, the ditch predates, and so that has the prescriptive authority over anything else that came along with it as a water facility. That's
Right.
my understanding of it, because it predates everything.
Yeah. And so what I'm getting at is this is, I mean, as you said, Peter, this is our water source, and there's currently no legally we have these prescriptive easements and some written easements and possibly some owned property along the alignment of the ditch, and to put in a place where there's even a small portion, if for some reason we couldn't down the road couldn't renew that easement and couldn't build the ditch, it makes the whole ditch functionally worthless. So if there's no way to guarantee either by maintaining the current easement and the current pipe underground so that we could just move it back there if necessary in the future. But also I wonder what can we hear a little bit more about what is the downside of just leaving the ditch and leaving the pipe in place, or even replacing the pipe if they're going to be tearing up the existing road anyway. What's the biggest downside to that? Because that seems like the most secure way to maintain our long-term access is by not changing any easement at all. I understand that there would be significant cost if we had to tear up the road in the future to repair or replace the pipe or something like that. But is that maybe a risk worth considering, that we incur some cost in the future to ensure that we can't ever lose the rights?
I think so typically, and this is just a general design guideline, you want to, as much as you can, you want to remove things out of major highways. Especially if you think about this pipe in the future, it will be running under pressure. And so anytime that you have a pressure pipe under a major highway like this, there's a possibility of a catastrophic failure associated with some kind of a leak or a burst. Think back to about 15 years ago, there was a section of water pipe under I-25 north of the Mousetrap that blew up and basically shut down the highway for several days. And so as a rule, what we do, and frankly, what we do as a utility is we also don't want our facilities in these types of roadways, because they become a whole lot harder to maintain. They become higher risk to maintain. They become more cost to the utility to maintain. So the right thing to do is to move it outside of the travel way of the road. It then goes into this new easement, and I think that the sound approach is just to ensure that, and I agree with Art, that the likelihood of this is close to zero, if not zero, which, so both sides of the coin are true. We could accept it as zero, or they could accept it as zero. And so then it becomes a matter of, if it's a zero, if it's such a low likelihood, there shouldn't really be any risk, any significant risk to the county, to just make sure that some provisions in there to provide protection for what is one of our most critical facilities for the city.
Yeah.
Peter, can I jump in on some of that though? Because I think we can still find a solution, but I think it may require some verbiage from the Corps to honor the prescriptive hierarchy of this line in its new location. Because this is not my road. This is US Highway 85 managed by CDOT, which is also in an easement owned by the Corps. And so the Corps, so where you're currently at in is prescriptive, which has your highest order. And I think that we want to maintain that as it moves into this new alignment, because the CDOT's road, it's not my road. You know what I mean? So I have a conundrum with this. And again, I think I was going to share my screen just really quick.
Art, just to respond to that, I think if you're able to do that, maintain that. I think if you're able to maintain that prescriptive nature of the easement, I think that is something that that works for us too. Again, it's eliminate the risk that someday in the future we might potentially have a stretch of pipe that we can't use because someone decides, you know what, we don't want to renew this easement.
Yeah, and I think that's the part that kind of concern me, but, and Neil has his drawing, but can you see my cursor, my hand on my drawing?
Yep.
Mhm.
So what happens is you guys are kind of in this area now, which is in CDOT's roadway easement inside the Corps' property, of which you have a senior right to be in there. You're like almost 100 years in there before the Corps came in. So as Peter stated, you have the senior rights. You never want to lose those. And I think what is happening is if we look at moving you, are you going to lose those senior rights? But the reason we want to relocate you, and what Peter said and what Steve has said, is in this here area now, you have minimal fill over your pipe. But as we expand the road this way, this auxiliary lane in here, which isn't the through lanes, which could be closed to work on, nonetheless is now with about, Neil confirmed, 12 to 15 foot fill over the pipe. So that's a bigger maintenance headache to get to your pipe. And it makes sense to move out into this area where it has minimal cover over it, easier to maintain. And so I think that the key is getting something in the verbiage from the Corps and revisiting that. I don't know if the commissioners would want to take on a fiduciary responsibility to, like, well, if the Corps says you have to move, then we have to tear up the road and then move you to your old location. I mean, I think it's pretty easy that maybe the next step is to not abandon your existing alignment, that and we could add that into documentation, and that this is now a second one. The Corps is probably not going to close the US highway there, you know, and so you're pretty protected over there, but it is 15 feet more fill. So I'm kind of speaking in circles, but I'm not sure that I think the solution is getting something out of the Corps to address this concern, you know.
And Art, I agree with you that we don't want the ditch under the road, because it just becomes more of a headache. It becomes more of a maintenance issue. It becomes more of a risk, basically.
Right.
And so I think the county and the city are on the same page as it relates to that. It really comes down to, I think, what you articulated there, which is if we can get the Corps to honor the seniority nature of the easement associated with the ditch and translate that, I think all issues go away. Barring that, we need to come up with something that provides that same level of assurance. Chair Moore, does that somewhat summarize, you think, where we're at?
Yes, I would. Let me replay it this way, but I think we're on the same page, Peter. It sounds like we do not need to have a motion tonight. I think I'm hearing enough concern on this board that we're not going to move forward. I mean, so you put it best. There's no alternative here. This severs a lifeline for the city. The downside risk is, however small, is fatal. So we have to have. I mean, I know I won't move forward with this without some kind of assurance, and I don't think there's, unless I hear some board members speak to the other way, we've got to do that for it to clear this board. So yes, I think whether it's clear that we can move back to where we were, or, you know, take the extra fill now and don't give it up, if whichever alternative gets us there, there is no ability for us to, you know, fill this cut pipe on our own later on, right? It is geographically determined. We're kind of stuck. So anyway, as minor as the risk is, we've got to have an assurance that we've got something solid in year 26. So does that work?
Yeah, I think it works for staff. I see Art's hand is up as well.
Yeah, thank you. Just because of the whole timing of this whole project and everything, would it be possible that this board could support something subject to the the concern being mitigated, either by the county or by the Corps, to reflect that you have not lost any of your, I'm going to just say in layman's terms, senior easement right, that you have immediately beyond this, because if the Corps exercised the same thing slightly beyond this 400 or 500 foot section that we're doing further to the east, you would be at the same risk. And I just don't think the Corps would do that without a lawsuit. I mean, you're cutting off the water supply to a whole city that had been in place. And it's my understanding that Ulysses S. Grant was the one who granted this, city ditch easement. I mean, there's some history about it, but that's a rumor I heard. So, so the risk is small, but I think the Corps needs to honor that and mitigate it. So I'm asking if this board, just because of the timing of moving forward with the project, could make it subject, to the concern being mitigated. Thanks.
Let me throw this out. Can we, I'm proposing we take the temperature of the board to that effect, that as long as this issue is sufficiently resolved, we would expect to move forward in support, and that further we are willing to do a special phone meeting. Well, we're all by phone anyway. We're willing to do a special meeting to move it forward once you present an alternative. I don't want to ask myself personally or to ask the board to approve that without knowing that solution is in fact satisfactory. But would that meet the needs? And as long as the board's willing to say we'll expedite a meeting to move this thing forward once you guys have an alternative to present, would that work for everybody? Let me do that. Let me pause and ask the board, is there any board member that has concerns about moving forward as long as we're presented with adequate protection of the lifeline? If that were in front of us tonight, would anyone be objecting to moving forward with this proposal? Right.
John, all I would like to see and make sure that's in that agreement also is that there is a statement that we are not abandoning our senior rights that we currently have to the easement we currently have, an actual statement there. So
Jim, as a layperson, I totally agree with you, but I would defer to our legal counsel to make sure that whether that's necessary or not. That sounds like the proper solution, but I just want qualified. I want a qualified opinion in terms of that whatever is being proposed protects the citizens.
correct. Okay.
And just to comment on that, I can look into that further and let you all know.
Okay. All right. Art and Peter, I think in particular, the board would be willing to move forward on this if we have a viable solution, and we would be willing to call a meeting for this sole subject to expedite it, if you guys can find that as a workable solution.
And I would just clarify that would be, subject to your counsel and your attorneys, approval on that mitigation, addressing that concern. Because again, Mr. Woodward, I don't own the land. So even where your existing easement is, I have no authority over that. I'm just trying to build a project. So thank you.
I think if I can interject real quick, I think for me, both with Water and Sewer Board and City Council, the message I would want to be sending to the Corps of Engineers at this point is we're not interested in approving anything less than something that maintains our permanent and senior rights in this area. And that's why I think John's suggestion that we not vote on something to, conditionally approve it or something like that, in spite of the urgency of the situation. This is gravely, grave situation for Inglewood, is that we have to maintain those rights. And so I'm willing to delay in order to get there. So good suggestion, John.
And I think Joe also put it well with just the caveat, we absolutely are wanting to cooperate on here. We just have to protect against that 0.01% risk, because it's just too fatal. Okay, Peter, let me just target to you more so. Is that workable from your perspective?
Yeah, I think
I'm not sure.
what we'll do is we'll come back and so we'll get Steve and Kate and Art and legal with the county to work with the Corps to mitigate this risk. And we hear what you're saying is we need to come back with some kind of a mitigation to that risk. And so I think that puts the pressure on the project team to figure that out, and I'm sure we can accomplish it. There's always ways to accomplish these things. It's just a matter of getting it in writing and getting it agreed to. So we hear what the board is saying, and we'll go back and expedite getting it resolved.
And speaking for the board, we will reconvene as quickly as possible to move this thing forward once you have a solution. So we will do our best not to hold it up for a minute extra after that. All right, great. Any further discussion on this subject? I don't see any hands raised. All right, I think we're good. Moving on to staff's choice. Again, thank you. I appreciate I appreciate our guests and your input and everyone's involvement on this.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, Peter, I'm not sure who's got the staff's
Yeah,
update today.
so we have two. We'll make them quick updates because we know people need to drop off at 5. So we'll try and get through these in the next couple of minutes. So Deputy Director Goodman will provide a quick update as to where we are on backflow, and then Deputy Director Stone will provide a update on where we're at from a Shutoff moratorium standpoint. These are the two things we've just been bringing up monthly to let you know how we're trending on them. So I'll turn it over to Angela.
I guess. Good news is we are at 97% for our
We actually
backflow.
can't, Angela, we can't hear you. It's coming in echoey.
Is this any better?
Way better.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I haven't done a Zoom call in a while, so my default settings went back to oddness. So good afternoon, everybody. Have some good news. We are at 97% for our backflow compliance testing ratio, which is wonderful. So we are currently in compliance for calendar year 2021. We have approximately 30 customers that are still outstanding in order to get us to that 100%. We sent a final round of letters towards right before Christmas last year. We gave those customers 45 days to reach compliance. That day is actually quickly approaching now, so that's the 21st of January. We're doing one more in-person visit to those customers to just see where they're at. The customers have been cooperative, but they don't really seem to have a sense of urgency to get those tests completed. So we're hoping to impart a sense of urgency, understanding that we may end up shutting them off. So we will be having that conversation this week, next week. Let's see. Of the 30 customers, Swedish Hospital is actually one of them. They've been slightly less cooperative than some of the other customers. So we're working very closely with them, trying to just get more information for if you are getting replacement parts, when is it scheduled? If you're getting a retest, when is that retest scheduled? They actually replaced the device and they're in the process of getting us that paperwork. So we're trying to make sure that they're not telling us the dog ate their homework and continuing to follow up with them. We have a couple irrigation lines that actually will be rescheduled in the spring once sprinkler systems get turned back on. And then we have a couple of those items. Swedish Hospital is actually one of them where we are approaching a regulatory trigger date with the state that we are, again, trying to impart a sense of urgency with them so that we don't receive a violation from the state because they're taking too long to get a retest or to get replacement parts. Does anyone have any questions?
I'll just add one thing. It depends on who we're talking to at Swedish. When we're talking to the line level staff, it doesn't seem to be an urgency. As soon as we contact the CEO, things magically start to happen. So we're back at the elevating the discussion to convey the urgency.
Correct.
Wonderful. I don't see any questions, so but thank you very much for the update. It sounds like good progress.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I'll just,
Water.
yeah, sorry for the interruption. I'll just go ahead and share my screen here. You seen a slide with the?
Yes, Sarah.
Okay, great. So this is just the update as of yesterday on the delinquent number of accounts. We do have some improvement since December. The number of outstanding accounts has gone down by 29 from December. And the outstanding balance is down by about $27,000, which is good news. So then just a couple additional statistics, 54, over half of those accounts owe $500 or less. There's 95 accounts that have balances over $1,000. Those customers have received letters this week, reminding them again that shutoffs are starting in February. And then those are actually being delivered to their door and stapled to their door. And then the top 10 accounts make up about 11% of the outstanding balance. So shutoffs will begin next month. And this is our quadrant billing map, although there's only 3 quadrants. The shutoff dates for non-payment will start with quadrant 1 in this area of town on February 24th. And then the other 2 quadrants are March 1st and March 8th, respectively. And then we have communicated through mailers in the bill and in our additional notifications that service is restored 24 to 48 hours with payment arrangements and payment in full of the current balance or the current bill, I should say. So that's the update I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Ty, go ahead. Oh, it disappeared.
Oh, are we charging a service fee by any chance, or did I miss that?
So we suspended late fees as well when we suspended shutoffs. We will be reinstating late fees. And then there's also a $5 fee to turn water back on.
Which we actually were just reviewing that fee this afternoon, and we're looking at, Sarah brought her bill from ECCV, and their turn on fee, I believe, is $45. So that might be another one of those fees that we need to update because it hasn't been looked at in many years.
Yeah, I think Denver Waters is much higher than that too.
It is.
Yeah, that's clearly out of line with the true cost.
Yep, agreed.
I don't see further questions. That's a good update, and it's a tough subject, especially with what's coming up in terms of having to actually shut customers off. But hopefully we see some good progress before we start having to do that. We are, I know, trying to push to allow others to get out of here. Any quick comments or questions before we adjourn so we can let people go? All right, I think we're good. Thank you all very much. Consider this meeting adjourned. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank you.